Welcome to The World We Want, the NAAEE podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Jerry Ellis. So what is the world you want? My guess is you're listening because you've also given it some thought. I know to start, I'd love to see a world of more equitable access to education. In order to drive greater sustainability, social justice, well-being, and understanding. On the World We Want podcast, we talk to some of the great thinkers, creators, educators, and conservationists, as well as some of the newest voices driving change around the world. Our conversations are about the world they want and how they are working to build the world we all want. And what do they share in common? Environmental education. One of our most powerful tools for creating a more just and sustainable world. It inspires and enlightens, it influences attitudes, and most importantly, it drives us to become guardians of the planet, caretakers for our communities, and it leads us to action. On this episode, we meet one of the newest voices leading environmental education, both in her native home, Malawi, and around the world. Joy Munthali embraced the challenges of environmental education early in life. While in her 20s, Joy founded the Green Girls Platform, a female-led initiative that works to address the violence that girls and women face due to climate change in Malawi. Joy worked in climate change education through empowerment of girls and has promoted STEM education. Her work has garnered international recognition. She's represented Malawi at global events like COP and in NAAE's 30 Under 30 program that recognizes young leaders who are using environmental education to create a sustainable future. And if her plate wasn't full enough, Joy recently became an advisor for the Global Environmental Education Partnership, or GEEP. Yet one more step in Joy's journey to share her passion and perspectives with the world. And now, I'm delighted that Joy is here to share both with us. Hi, Joy, and welcome to The World We Want.
I'm happy to be here, Jerry.
I wanted to start with, you're from Malawi, and Malawi is known as the warm heart of Africa. And because, the people there are so generous and friendly. Most people in the country, as you know, are descendants of the Bantu, and they've been connected to Malawi for 1,000 years. And so they're really connected to the land and to the place. What was that like growing up as a small girl there?
I could say for me, people have been asking me why I travel for 2 days and I'm back in Malawi. And I'm always like, I can't leave this country. Like, everyone in the country treats you like you are from their family. You can't get lost and not be found in Malawi. Like, people will find you and they'll return you. So for me, it's been that warmth and also something that makes me feel weird when I meet people that are not warm, because of I grew up in a country where everyone is willing to help and everyone is willing to support you in a different way. And for me, as a girl, I used to go to a primary school, a full primary school. They're public schools. And every day, I would meet somebody new. And there was a time when I went there with my shoes and I left them at school. I went back home barefooted. My mom did not like that, but it was because I had met another girl in class who did have shoes and her feet were getting sore because we had to walk to school. And then I was like, well, my feet are fine, so I can give my shoes away. And then I got back home and I found my mom and she was like, where are your shoes? And I said, well, I gave them away. And the next day she went with me to school to look for the other girl because she thought they had taken the shoes away from me. And so when we got there, when she saw the girl and when she saw what I had done, she actually started a fundraising drive to get shoes for girls. And so for me, that was something that really drew me closer to people, that we could be the support that we need for each other, and we don't have to maybe go outside of our comfort zones just to get help. And so I have grown up with that, and I have seen that actually translate into people just being kind and how warmth can really go a long way. And that also helps me to really be trusted easily in communities, because people see what we're doing and they're like, wow, we know that girl, and when she comes, this is what she does. So I think the warmth
Wow.
is, yeah.
That is an amazing story. I Do you think that's because, I mean, Malawi is one of the poorest countries in the world. Over half the population lives, in poverty or below the poverty line. But at the same time, I think it's like 4/5 of the country. There's 22 million people or something in Malawi. But about 80% of those people, they earn their living off the land. And so how do you think that, thinking about your story and the shoes, I mean, do you think it makes a difference in our willingness to give to others when we all are somewhat equal? And there's wealthy people in Malawi, but when the vast majority of people are like that little girl going to school with no shoes, does it make it easier to connect, do you think?
Uh-huh. I think it does, to a certain extent. Um, well, what I have seen is there's some people that if you're working together and you feel like, well, I have this and my friend doesn't have this, or I own this and we could really share. I have seen how that has built communities around each other. And then also at the same time, when we have people that are now worthier than the rest, they feel like they could earn more, and then they stop being part of the community or not be part in community with others. And I think also because in sharing we connect more, and this has been more evident with my work with faith communities. I have seen them share and bring people together just by sharing. And if you're willing to share, people are willing to trust you because now they know that you're not somebody who is only taking away from them, but you're also bringing something. And I've felt that that is what brings us together. That is what makes a community work. And it's evident during Christmas in Malawi. Like if it's Christmas and you're hosting a party, everyone is going to show up. And there's sometimes when people hear music, they just come through. Even at weddings, people just show up. They get crash weddings because they've heard the music. They want to be part of that. They want to dance with you. So and it's also really hard when you're doing a community activity because once people see you bringing water or bringing snacks, now you have a lot of children coming to the event and you have to regulate and say, we're only here for 40 people, but we could really help more. So it's, it's a lot of sharing and a lot of warmth and a lot of kindness, which also goes a long way in trusting each other.
Well, part of the reason I wanted to start the podcast off with talking about that trust and that community is as a young woman, you're walking into communities and trying to talk to them about something that might seem a little bit foreign at first. And bridging that gap requires trust and it requires an understanding of community. And I think at its core, it's the same as you would find anywhere in the world. But I think it's also even more, not more important, but I think it's a challenge in a place like where you are in Malawi, where people are trying to just eat and survive every day, right? And now you're coming in with all these ideas that probably seem, I don't have time for those. I don't have time to think about all those crazy ideas this young girl's coming in with. I wanted to talk to you about how you bridge that trust gap in community.
Hmm. Well, I'll start with a story because it's what really helped me build trust. Um, when we were starting Green Girls, it was 2016, and we were not even called Green Girls. We were just a group of girls that were so keen to make a difference or do something differently. And then we went to a community that was around our school. And when we went there, we're like, oh, we're here to talk about climate change and the environment and everything. and we want to educate girls. And so we were bringing in girls together to meet with us. And so there was this one day that we went and we were sent away by the chiefs. And so I was really confused because in my head, I thought I was trying to help. Why are you chasing us out? And so we stopped going to that community because we thought it was hostile and they didn't want us there. And then we started working with schools and the easy things that we were supposed to do. But then I saw that there was another group of, there was an environmental club at our school that was working in the same community and they were welcome and we were not welcome. And so I went back to ask them, how did you do it? How did you get the community to trust you that they don't send you away? And the leader told me, well, we didn't even talk to the chiefs. We talked to the people that talked to the chiefs and they said, I did the same thing, but they sent me away. And then I went back with two of my friends. It was really scary because it was a male-dominated community and we were just the three of us. And then when we went there, we asked to talk to the chief. And then he was also surprised because he never thought we would be brave enough to talk to him. And so we went there and he said, well, you know what? We have never seen girls come to this community to educate girls. It's not something that we would condone. And at the same time, you look like you are educated. You look like you are dressed well. We feel like you would teach our girls prostitution because that's what people who are dressed well do. And then I was like, oh, so those are your reasons. And then we started trying to help him understand why we were in the community and trying to tell him that, well, we saw these issues happening in your neighboring community. And we have seen that girls are affected by how they don't have firewood anymore. They don't have water anymore. So they need water, they need firewood. And this is what we're trying to do, to educate girls so that we can find solutions that work in your community. And all we're trying to do is to educate girls and keep them in school. And we feel like if they are in school, then your community will eventually develop because you need girls to be in school. And so he was like, that is why you're here? I said, yes, we're talking about the environment. We're talking about climate change, which seems like something foreign, but it's something that will matter to all of us. And we need girls to be on board. And so after that talk, every time we would go to the community, the chief would be present in most of our lessons. Like he wanted to listen to what we're doing. He wanted to be part of that. And then he asked us that, well, you're doing this with girls. Can you do this with women as well? Because I feel like our women need this information. And so we're like, well, our niche is girls, but we could expand it and talk to the women. And so when we started now talking to the women, and then it was that we're working with the whole community. And up to date, I still work with them and they still know me by name. And that's because we took the time to actually sit down, listen to them, and help them understand why we're there, and then try to find ways in how we can work together. And I felt that was a very learning curve for me that helped me to also have that knowledge that, well, I don't know what I'm walking into, but I feel like I'll talk to somebody that will help me to learn the community and also come up with initiatives or projects that work for the community.
So you were mentioning this was, the beginning of what's called Green Girls Platform. Tell me a little bit more about the Green Girl Platform.
So I would say privileged enough to study environmental science. And it's always different when I tell people that I never studied geography or agriculture in any of my studies, but I ended up studying environmental science, which is connected to the agriculture and geography in Malawi. But so when I went to the university and one of my friends grabbed me to go to a certain club, they used to call it Students for Climate Justice. And for me, I had no idea what environmental science was, what people would do when they're environmental scientists. I was just there because, well, the government rerouted me to a program that they thought was suitable for me. And then when I went there, I found that the whole group was boys. I was the only girl and I was only there because somebody grabbed me to go there. And then when I went there, I heard what they were talking about and I was like, what is climate justice? What do you mean when you say climate justice? And then somebody tried to explain it to me and I was like, oh, okay, sounds interesting. But then I wasn't interested enough. And then they were like, oh, we meet every day, so you have to come in next week. Then I went back the next week, and they were doing elections. And so they had a rule that if the leader is male, the next year it has to be a female. And I was the only girl in the room. So they're like, well, you're here, so now you're the leader. And I was like, okay, we can do this. And after that, that's when I started going into communities and learning about what climate justice really looks like on the ground. And I went to one community where I saw how girls had water close by, and then other rivers dried up. And they were walking from their community to our school to draw water, which was like a very long distance. And when I went back, the number of girls that we kept meeting kept going down, and we would only maybe meet male students or or boys in the classroom. And then I started asking the questions like, "What is going on? Why is the number going down every now and then?" And so I went to the communities to check, and one of the girls told me it's a lot of work to be in class. It's a lot of work to just be present. And then when you fail, you're seen as you're dumb. You don't have what it takes to compete in the classroom. But then we have to draw water, we have to get firewood, we have to get home to cook, we have to help our mothers wash, to help them. If they're not around, then we become the moms. So it's not the same thing as the boys who just wait for the water to come home. They bath and they're in class. They don't even know who drew the water. And then for me, it was that connection of trying to understand how climate change impacts girls differently. And then with my capacity as the leader of the Students for Climate Justice, I was invited to so many conferences that people wanted students in. And then I went to this one conference where we were talking about gender and climate change. And for me, it was an exciting place to talk about what I had seen in communities. And I wanted to talk about that with other women, like what are we doing? What can we do about this? And what solutions can we come up with? But then I walked into the room and I saw like 90% of the room were men. And there were like 50 of them, and then 10 women, and I was the 10th woman. So I was the only young person in the room representing girls and young women. So for me, I was very surprised because I thought that would be the space where they have more women to talk about gender and climate change. And so when I asked one of the organizers, like, what is going on here? Why do you have this number? And he said, well, girls are not interested. You don't want to be in these kinds of conversations. I said, in my head, I was screaming because I knew girls that were interested. I knew people that wanted to be in that room, but they were never invited. They didn't have what it takes to be invited to that room. And so for me, Green Girls was trying to prove a point that we're interested and we want change and we can be part of these conversations. We ended up forming a structure, something that brought in girls, like a platform that was just for girls. And we used to call it something in our language called our platform that anyone was invited to. And so in 2018, somebody saw what we had written on Facebook and then they were like, whoa, this is interesting work. How are you making the connections between climate change and violence and the effects on girls? And we're like, we are living it, we're experiencing it. We are with communities that are experiencing this. And then no one is talking about this yet, but we think it's important. And then they were like, well, can you organize yourselves and become something that we could fund the work that you're doing? And so we're like, oh, okay. That's when Green Girls came about because we thought, what other name represents the work that we do than just being girls that are trying to be green?
Yeah, there's a saying that be careful what you wish for; it might come true. And you sound like a perfect example of that. You be careful what you wish for. Now look at all the work that you have to do. Which before we finish today, I do want to talk about all the work you do because I was a little blown away with all the stuff you are doing. It's overwhelming almost. I felt like I'm not doing anything in my life compared to you. I want to you mentioned this gender gap, and earlier you mentioned being privileged. It seems like there was two gaps there that you had to kind of cross over or bridge over, and one was, as someone who's privileged going into communities, you'd be seen a certain way, even though you would physically kind of look like everyone else in the village. they would know that because you're privileged, you have certain resources, you have certain things that they don't have. There's that. But then there's also that gender gap as well. I mean, being the only girl in the room, or you were elected to be the head of elected as the head person because they needed a girl and you filled the role. And so crossing those different bridges, how did you approach that? Because I'm sure that there might be a number of people listening to this podcast who are facing the same thing in whatever community they are around the world. At what point did you start to realize you had those bridges that you needed to cross?
There are times when I cross a bridge and I'm like, oh, I crossed that bridge and I didn't even notice. But then for me, gender it's an issue in Malawi, and representation is an issue globally. But then for me, I grew up in a family of, we're like 8 of us, and 5 are girls, 3 are boys. And so I grew up with my sisters who are really strong women, and I have seen them do amazing things. And so I think that gave me a different picture of how people picture girls in communities or girls in different settings. And because I know what girls are capable of doing, I know what we are all doing in different ways and how we can collectively work together, then for me, it has always been, I don't have to, it's not even a question of what girls can do because I have seen them do it. And then maybe I have also been to all girls primary school, secondary school. And then for me, it's because I know what we can do. I know what we're capable of. And then when people are canceling us out, it feels like, no, you don't know. You haven't tried. Why are you doing this? And I play basketball, which is also a male-dominated sport in Malawi. And I see that happening a lot. And so for me, it's always being able to recognize, like, stepping back and seeing how you are not part of the same people that are maybe causing the things that you're working against. Because I have seen how you join a male-dominated sector and then you forget that you're a woman. You become one of the boys. You forget that you need people in that sector that look like you, that are actually you. And so for me, it's always sitting back and then recognizing who is here, who isn't here, and who really needs to be here. And I think asking those questions has also helped my work, because when I know who isn't there and who has to be there, then I work towards bringing them in and helping them understand why they need to be there if they don't fully understand, but also showing them the power that they have to actually challenge systems and to work around systems. And so there are times when people, I have been to places where I'm like, oh, well, you don't need me there, but I know somebody that you need and I will have them come there. And that's all because I recognize those things and I try to step back a bit and know the power or the privilege that I have in that moment to actually bring others in, or to actually make space for everyone to be there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Albright from NAAEE. That was our host, Jerry Ellis, speaking with Joy Munthali about the incredible path she's taken in her work as an environmental educator. They'll be right back with more stories of Joy's journey as a presence in climate action and a leader to young women who, like her, have visions of a healthier, more equitable place to call home. Thanks so much for tuning in to The World We Want, the NAAEE podcast. In each episode, we shine a spotlight on folks just like Joy, who are using education to create a better future for us all, one inspiring action at a time. This podcast is a project of the North American Association for Environmental Education. You can learn more about us on our website, naaee.org. We'd also love to connect with you on social media. You can find NAAEE on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And your feedback means the world to us. So if you're enjoying this conversation, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. Let us know what you think by sending us an email at podcast@NAAEE.org. Now let's jump back in with Jerry and Joy to hear more about the importance of meaningful partnerships and collective growth in creating impactful environmental education programs around the world.
Have you found yourself in that situation often, having to really rethink the conversation and the dialogue to create the kind of network that you need?
Yes, I have done this a lot, and it's everyone from funders to people in communities. It's like we need to have that conversation and say, this is why we're here. This is why I'm here. And this is how we can work together. So, with like the government, it's a huge issue, and we have been trying for years. But then I have seen the small wins that we're now having that really now show that we had to have that conversation. And so, in 2019, they also needed a young woman to represent Malawi at the Conference of Parties, the climate change conference that was COP25. And so because I was the girl that everyone knew in the sector, they were like, oh, we already have somebody. They recommended me to attend COP25. And I had never been to any climate change negotiation locally. I had no idea what they do. I didn't even know what happens at a global scale and what I was working into. And we didn't have a briefing on what I was supposed to do in that space. And so I was sent there. And when I got in, when I saw how hectic that was, I was like, whoa. And I was the only young woman representing Malawi. We were like two young people, and the other person wasn't in the country. He had to come from outside the country to attend the conference. And so for me, I was like, this is a very important space, and had seen so many young people there. But then for Malawi, we were only two. And so after that conference, I was like, I'm never going to go alone again. I'll make sure that next time we're there is more of us, because we need more people to be here. And so when I went back to Malawi, I had to write recommendations for the government on how the conference was and what they could do for meaningful youth engagement. I did that. I wrote recommendations. I remember there were like 19 recommendations on what they had to do. And then I saw the final draft that they had, and my recommendations were not there. They had like one recommendation out of the 19. And then I wrote back to them like, didn't you see what I wrote? And they're like, oh, wow, we saw all of that. But then this is like the final report, and we needed one recommendation from young people. And so for me, I was like, well, why? Because all those 19 recommendations are really important. And if you took them up, then you would know why you need to do this. And so, well, they didn't do it. But one of my recommendations is that we needed to train more young people. We needed to train more young women to be part of the negotiations, to understand how policies look like and why they had to be part of the policy negotiation process. And because they didn't give me that space, I was like, well, I'll show you the value by training young women to come into that space, and maybe you will see what happens then. And then by doing that, that was 2020, 2021. And then in 2022, they saw 3 young women going with them to the climate change conference. In 2021, rather, when COVID had just passed and they were opened up, 3 young women went to the conference, and they were really active, more than the negotiators that were there. And then they asked, where are you guys from? How are you here? And they said, well, we're from Green Girls Platform, and this is what we do. And so by that, they were like, oh, okay, we really need young women. We really need them to be in this space. And now we're part of the National Steering Committee on Climate Change. But that happens because we had to prove a point. We had to show them why we need to be in those spaces. And now one of the people that were really close to me, were really part of Green Girls, is now part of the advisory committee for the least developed countries chairperson. It's sad for me because I lost somebody really good with Green Girls, but then it's also good because now we have somebody working with the government to show them why we need more young women in the space. So it's been like that, trying to prove a point, trying to show people that we need to be here. We need these connections. We need to have, you need us here, and we're not going anywhere.
Well, I mean, I'm so glad you're talking about that, because there was a quote that I read where you said, I've been at meetings where I didn't understand anything, and I was just required to be there to show that young people were part of the process. It's almost like you were a token person that, they just needed to, the government needed to show, oh yeah, we sent somebody there. And yet when I read that, my first thought was, how do we level this playing field? Because over and over again, as I read through a lot of including the mission for Green Girls platform, I'm just going to quote it to create a safe space for girls and young women, the skills and knowledge to share their own climate resilient solutions to fully enjoy their rights. And that seems like that's a strong part of creating a level playing field. What do you think are the steps to do that? Because there's a lot in it. I mean, that's a mission packed with a lot to do. So maybe we can break it down just a little bit, because I think it's really valuable and really important. First, maybe connect for me how climate resilient solutions are important so that girls and young women can fully enjoy their rights and what those rights are. So what do you mean? What does that mean to you?
We had a long fight about that mission with my team. It wasn't pleasant.
Every mission does. Believe me, we just rewrote it for the nonprofit that I'm the executive director of, and the board, we fought for a couple of months over a new mission. So yes, I understand completely. So I guess that's why I was so fascinated by what that means to you and what that means to your organization.
All right. So for me, what I have seen is most of the work that is done on climate change in Malawi is imported. It's the things that work somewhere else that people think will work in our country, and then they end up not working. And I saw this with one community where we went to, and we saw women had a borehole that was really close to their houses, but they never used it. They would still walk and draw water from the river. And then for me, I was like, why are you doing this? Why do you have to walk longer if you have it right here? And then they were like, well, we never asked for this. A certain organization came here and they wanted to build a borehole. So they did. And we don't use it because they didn't know why we have to draw water from the river. And then by talking to the women, I heard stories about they were facing so many different issues with their families and their husbands. And when they went to draw water, that was like the time when they would cool off and tell their friends the stories that they had. And that was helping them with their mental health. And they needed that space. They needed that walk with their friends. It built community. And so for me, it was one of the things that really helped me to understand how communities work. And resilience is about the ability of people to bounce back and the ability of people to build back better. And they can't do that if everything that they have is dictated to them. Like, you have to do this, you have to do this. They won't do it. It won't be second nature to them. But if you really come up with solutions that are working for people, then if they face anything, you have the advantage that they know this thing by heart and they would do it again because they know it. And Malawi, we rely on agriculture. We rely on everything that comes from the field to the table. And agriculture is also very vulnerable to climate change. And so if we have solutions that do not work for women and they're the ones that are doing 80% of the work, then how do we expect our agriculture system to be resilient? But then if the women come up with solutions that they feel like, well, if we do this, if we use this type of manure, our soil will be fertile, then we have to use this type of manure. Then you know that they will make it alone, they will use it, and it will work. And if anything happens, they'll be able to bounce back from anything. And I have seen this happen where girls just decide, well, we want a community garden and we want to set up a community garden because we think we could sell vegetables and we could sell tomatoes and we'll make the money that we need to sustain the business. And when they do that, you're assured that the business will excel, and they are doing it and it's excelling. But then if you bring in something they don't know, then it's really hard to do it. But that only happens if they feel safe enough, if they feel open enough to share the solutions. And in most circumstances, they don't because of different systems that are in communities, in their culture or in their beliefs. But if we have a space that they can just come and share what they think works or what the wildest dream is, and then make that happen, then we're sure that this is something that is going to help them to enjoy their human rights. And this is the right to food, the right to clean water, the right to a safe environment, to sexual reproductive health rights, something that helps them. And then it's only what we do with my team is to try to make that happen by just talking. And people are always fascinated with how we work. We just go there and we listen. We don't even offer anything. Somebody was like, what's the end goal? Are you going to give us money? Are you going? I'm like, no, I'm just here to listen. So whatever you think works, well, we might go back and we don't have the money to do this, but we know that if we hear that, then we won't sleep at night. We'll try to make that dream happen. And we hear a lot of things, there are a lot of ideas. Some of them I'm like, whoa, you really think we're millionaires? But then we're not. But then I feel like in those conversations, in those spaces, that is where resilience comes from, because now they know they have a space they can always go back to. And if it doesn't work, they still come back and think about, why didn't that work? Why didn't we do well? Why didn't we do better? And then they try to find solutions that actually work. So I feel like that's the only way that we could help, or that's the only way that resilience will come, or the only way that I define resilience, by just letting people do what they think works best.
That's really, yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking about that definition of resilience, and it's not one that you often hear. And that's really, it comes down to ownership. If you have ownership, then it's almost like resilience is built into the DNA of that. And no, it's fascinating. It was interesting because you brought up the word listening a couple of times, and I've heard that so many times. International groups especially come in, foreign NGOs come in, and a lack of listening. And then it almost impregnates local NGOs that kind of just go and do the thing, bring money and do a thing, rather than, wait, stop, let's all just listen for a little bit. And that seems to be kind of built right into the fiber of what, Green Girls platform really is you've been listening from the very beginning.
Yeah. And I had a hard conversation with somebody yesterday, and they kept talking, and I was like, oh, really? I just kept listening. And then at the end, they were like, you actually helped me find a solution just by listening to me. And I was like, that's the only way we do this. Because most of the time, I feel like people know what they need and people understand their challenges better. And if you just listen, they actually come up with the solutions themselves. You just have to be there. And what I have seen with NGOs in Malawi is and it's not only Malawi, it's a global pandemic for NGOs. We have the savior syndrome. Like, we have to save this community. We have to do this. We have to bring this. We have to bring that. But then usually people are like, oh, well, you brought that, but we can't use it. It doesn't work. It's not about us. And there was this time in Malawi when people were doing cook stoves, like bringing in cook stoves that work for communities, and they were building kitchens and putting the cook stove in the kitchen. And then after the project phased out, none of the women used those cook stoves. It was just a wasted kitchen where they would put their plates on the cook stove. And when we went in and we asked, but these guys gave you cook stoves. Why are you still using firewood to cook? Why are you still using the ordinary cook stoves to cook? And then one woman said, well, if I am in that kitchen, then who is with my kids when I'm cooking? Who is with my husband? Who is talking to my husband? That kitchen actually takes me away from my family, takes me away from my community. I'm alone in that kitchen. And then for us, when we're cooking, it's time to catch up with the kids. Like, what happened at school? How was your day? How is everything happening? And if I am not doing that, then I don't have enough time to talk to my children. And so for me, it was by that listening that I told the people doing cookstoves that you're doing it wrong. Come up with cookstoves that they can put in the middle of everyone, and they're cooking in the middle of everyone. And that is actually working, because now women can carry the cookstoves and put them wherever they want and have their children or their community around them. And so I feel like listening is different. People listen, but then some people just listen with already preconceived notions that this is what we want to do and assumptions. But if you're really listening and understanding what people are trying to do with intention, that could make a difference. That could really change the way that NGOs work or how we are trying to do the work that we do, and really not stop window dressing the same solutions that are not working, come up with things that will actually work or make sense to people.
Yeah, exactly. You said I saw it written in something that you were quoted as saying that about being compromised and exploited by other organizations. And along the same lines of listening, that feels like it kind of almost goes hand in hand with this thing. Is it other, by that, did you mean that they are not listening to you as another NGO? Or what? Explain that to me.
Well, okay. I really hope donors don't listen to this, because we really hope.
Oh Lord. Okay, we're going to go down that going through that tunnel, are we? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I have seen this happen a lot, and it's happening to young people, and it's because donors have check boxes that they have to check, that they actually worked with young people. They have targets, they have things that they want to get out of the way, but then they forget that young people don't want to reach targets. We just want to make change, and change sometimes takes time. And we did this with one donor that it was really uncomfortable that we had to give them their money back, because we were like, no, this is too much work and it doesn't suit the work that we do. And it was only because they wanted us to, make the solution work when it wasn't working. And we're like, no, we can't do that. Change takes time. And especially climate change work, it takes time. I can't educate a person today and expect them tomorrow to stop everything. I have to be talking to them, keep talking to them, so that they could actually change their mindset. And so it's really hard. And I feel like listening builds trust, because when you feel listened to, when you feel like somebody's really taking on whatever you're saying and they are doing something about it, then you can trust them to tell them anything. And there's some people, let's say we have an open door policy, you can come here to tell us everything. But if you go back and tell them, whatever we're trying failed, be like, oh, we're not giving you our money ever again. But then there's some that are really open enough to say, well, it didn't work. Now what do we do? And then for me, it's always trying to find those kinds of people that will say, well, it failed. What did you learn? And what do you do? What do we do from there? And so what also I have seen with young people is that once you feel like somebody isn't listening to you, but you need something from them, you start appeasing them. So it's easy to say, oh, just give us the money, we'll do this. And I don't want to say something, you clap hands. They do this, you're happy. But then deep down, they're crashing the work that you're doing, and they're drifting you away from the things that initially you wanted to do. And so people that don't listen exploit, because you could just say one thing and they say, oh, yes, we like that and we're going to focus on that. But then that wasn't even what you were trying to say. I have seen people come. We had this one donor. It was really uncomfortable for me. But they were like, well, we like what you're doing and we'll fund your work. And then we're like, okay, that's great. We really need the funding. And then they took longer to give us the funds. And we had to do the program in September. And then they were like, oh, you can use the funds that you have and we'll wire the funds to you and refund everything. And I was like, oh, cool. You're a trusted donor. We can do that. We did that in September and we got the money back the next year in June. We're a very small organization and we had to spend over 10,000 US dollars for the event and make them look good, because it was supposed to be their event. But then we got the money back almost 6 months later. And for me, it was, how was I going to make salaries, support the organization, pay for operations, when all the money that we had invested in that, because we believed that the donor would actually show up. So it's because they they didn't take the time to actually learn what we do. And they thought we had the money that we didn't have. And that's why we kept telling them that we don't have the money for this. We need the money for this. But then they were like, oh, well, you can use the money that you have and then no refund. And then 6 months later for a small organization, that's a long time. And a lot of trying to tell people that, well, things will work out, trying to build hope that wouldn't exist. But then I feel like that happens because they didn't take the time to really learn the work that we do and understand why we do what we do, but also know that this is what happens if these guys don't have money. And then after that, when they came back and they said, we want to do another activity with you, I said, well, we don't have the time at the moment. But when we do, we'll come back to you. And it was because that's not the kind of people that we want to work with.
That makes me think of the fact that you just recently became advisor to something called GEEP, the Global Environmental Education Partnership. As an advisor, as a young advisor, both young to the organization, but young in chronology in your age, what advice would you bring to organizations like that in trying to work and not make some of the same mistakes? I mean, it sounds like listening is always a good first step, but I was just wondering if there were other things that you thought about when you step into that role as an advisor to an organization.
Wow. For me, I think Jeep is one of the advisory roles that I really talk about in groups. And I'm like, yes, I'm an advisor for this. And somebody asked me, what exactly do you do? And I said, I have a network of amazing people, amazing humans that are doing amazing work in environmental education. And I think it's important that I learn from them. And I also understand why they decided to set up it's a global environmental education partnership. Why do we need that? And I saw this especially at the WEEK, the World Environmental Education Conference, that we need environmental education and we need education that works for young people, education that works for children, and education that works in our context. And the only way we can learn that is if we are connected, if we have the networks that we need. And I think for me, what advice I bring is, well, there are always some blind spots that people have when they're doing the work that we do. And an advisory role is basically trying to show you that blind spot and tell you, well, we are not doing this. We need to do this. And I think that only happens if you're talking to each other, if you are in that role together, if you understand what we're trying to do. And also because I think an advisory role is really cool because you only provide advice. You don't have to take it. You only provide it. I feel like it's the time where you have to sit down and think, well, how best can we do this? We're already doing amazing work around the world. But then what are we missing? Who are we missing? And why are we not? Why don't we have this on board? And then it's also amazing because now you learn from other advisors who are seasoned and are really good in the job. And there's Judy and the whole group that are really, they have knowledge about environmental education and how environmental education works. And they also have stories about what didn't work and what we need to do better. And by listening to that and knowing that there's still some things that we're leaving out, and there's some things that we could learn, that has actually helped me grow. And I think one thing that I also learned from the advisory role is how to incorporate place-based learning, which is something that I was really scared to do because I thought it was expensive. But then by just hearing how others are doing it, how it's working in other communities, and it doesn't even take a lot of money. You just have to take people outside of their ordinary environments or what they're used to. And I have been we're now using that at Green Girls and how we're seeing the changes on how place-based learning is actually helping children and young people take care of the environment or relate to the environment differently. And I feel like that only happens because I am part of this advisory role. So even though I'm advising, I'm also learning a lot. And I'm also trying to show that, well, we are a global partnership list. This is what we need to do, and these are some of the spots that we need to take on board.
Now you're an advisor. You were part of 30 Under 30. You founded Green Girls platform. I mean, there's a list. There's a laundry list of things that you seem to be doing. First, when do you breathe and eat?
Oh, right now.
Do you actually breathe and eat? I mean, like when the reason I ask is because with all that going on, how do you avoid getting overwhelmed and burn out? I mean, I think it's a huge problem that a lot of people in the nonprofit world, the NGO world face, because it just seems like there's so much to do. And every time you do something, you see 10 other things you need to do to make, to create the world we want. How do you avoid that burnout and that being overwhelmed?
Well, I'm still figuring that out. I think one thing that I have learned my work at Green Girls is that I need help. I can't do everything alone. And I simply can't do it. I think it was in 2023, we had Cyclone Freddy in Malawi, and everything was depressing. The communities that we used to work with had been displaced. We had phone calls coming in after phone call about how we were supposed to respond and provide support. And then I have never felt as powerless as that moment, because it was a lot and I didn't know how to handle everything. I was really burnt out because we were trying to do everything for everyone. And then my sister came in and she was like, who is taking care of you? Because you're doing all of this, but who is taking care of you? And you come home and you're tired and you can't sleep because somebody else's story is keeping you awake at night. So just think about that, because once you are burnt out, then whatever you're doing won't be done in whatever way that you're doing it. And think about that, because once you're burnt out, then you can pour from an empty cup. And so for me, that was like a wake-up call that I need somebody to take care of me too. I need to take care of me because I can't take care of everyone else. And this year we did something really interesting at Green Girls. People still are having problems with that, but I stepped down from my role as the executive director. And yeah, I am now doing partnerships and resource mobilization work, which is not my area of expertise, but I feel like it's something that I could really contribute a lot more of myself to. And also because we have this policy that when you get to 30, you're supposed to transition out. And so I'll be 30 next year. So I was thinking about, what if I'm not here? Who would do what I do? Because there's no one else that has ever had the role. And I think I have stepped back a lot, and I have seen how that is helpful for me, because now I don't have to do everything. I don't have to be telling everyone what to do. I don't have to be the one writing contracts. I don't have to be the one signing everything. I have to be the one that is actually providing support to somebody. And by just doing that, I am now taking care of me. I am doing more of the things that I like. I can take a holiday, which is something that I never did. I feel like by just, and I had to learn that the hard way, that I need support. But I feel like everyone that's doing change making work, they need to understand that you can do everything, and there has to be somewhere where you say, well, I have done the best that I can do. And also something that I have learned is partnerships and collaborations, building partnerships that help you to know that, well, I have done this. I have provided this girl with education. I know you can provide menstrual hygiene. I know you can provide sexual reproductive health rights information. And then we have that circle where we know that we're doing everything and we're trying to provide all the support that a girl needs without burning out, without trying to solve every problem. So I feel like just by doing that, just by having a network and social support or structure that supports you, that helps me to avoid burnout.
Well, I hope obviously, I hope you're connected to Green Girls for a long time. I mean, your institutional knowledge and your experience is so valuable. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, you've hinted at some of it, but what is the world you want, both personally and maybe how the world you want personally is connected to what the world I think we all would want?
Well, I saw the title of the podcast and I was like, what is the world that I want? Because obviously this is not the world that I want to live in. But um, so for me, I I love playing with kids. I love talking to children and I love hearing their dreams. And what I have seen happen is at some point we stop dreaming, at some point we stop visioning. It's because we just feel like everything that we used to dream about or the visions that we had as children just don't work or aren't possible. But I want a world where everyone's dream comes true. Like, you don't have to be limited by what you see or how you grow up. I want a world where everyone has the possibility to do whatever they want, where you realize your full potential and you know that you didn't get here because you had this certain identity. A world where you can wake up and you have all the things that you need. A world where you don't have to feel like you're doing everything alone, but everybody does their part to ensure that we are all just showing you that we're all in this together. A world where there aren't systems that are already put in place to keep you where you are and you can't do anything about it. And a world where you just have to exist because you're a human being, not because you are this kind of race or you are from this kind of country or you bring this to the table, but a world where you just exist as humans and people actually understand each other because we're just humans trying to do something. So for me, I want a world where there is freedom, a world where dreams come true, and a world where all the visions that we had as children don't die.
Now that I couldn't agree more. I want to thank you for doing your part. Have done and are doing such a huge part of making the world we want a real place. So thank you so much. And thank you for being on the podcast. I really have enjoyed this past hour.
Thank you for having me, Jerry. I didn't even realize we were going past an hour.
We could go for many more hours, but thank you so much, Joy. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
My deepest thanks to Joy Munthali for sharing her personal journey to strengthen the role of girls and young women in environmental education in Malawi and around the world. To learn more about Joy's journey and about the world we want, visit our website at NAAEE.org/podcast. That's NAAEE.org/podcast. As you just heard, environmental education is as multifaceted as the diversity of guests on our podcast. To explore every element, subscribe to the World We Want podcast. There's a link on our website, or you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We would love to hear what you think, and if there's an aspect of environmental education you want to know more about, let us know. Email us at podcast@naaee.org. The World We Want podcast is a production of NAAEE, the North American Association for Environmental Education. I'd like to send a special thanks to our entire team, Carrie Albright, Judy Browse, Amanda Cueca, and Stacy Pierpoint, with additional production support from Globio. You can learn more about Globio at globio.org. And a special thanks to you for being a part of the world we want. A better world starts with each of us together. I'm Jerry Ellis for everyone at The World We Want. Thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing The World We Want, the NAAEE podcast.